Hi, I'm Matt, and this is my garage. Today, another step on the Lotus 1988 Lotus Esprit Turbo. I'm excited. Today's focus is transmission and replacing that circlip, right? Everybody's heard the stories. Replace your circlip, replace your circlip. Takes transmission out. Bad things can happen if you don't. Well, we're going to talk about that today. What's entailed with it, what happens if the circlip goes bad, and why you should change that circlip. So let's get started. All right, today I'm going to attempt to get the transmission back together again. Got some parts here, two outboard, axle, shafts and housing. Got the differential over here. Here's the clutch fork and the tube for the secondary shaft to go through. Throw out bearing. There's a shaft right there. Got the back cover, and then ordered all new nuts and bolts. Over here, got the bell housing ready to go on. It's about how far I took the transmission down. I didn't get into the inside of it. I am certainly not qualified for that kind of work, but felt pretty comfortable at least taking it down to this level. And I really wanted to replace that circlip in there on that secondary shaft, because those things are known to go bad, and that can just wreak havoc on your crankshaft and a lot of other things. So yeah, going to replace that circlip. Right, here's the clutch shaft for the transmission. You hear everybody talking about placing that circlip when you have the transmission out of the car, and that's this sucker right here. The originals were round, and this one has more of a rectangular cross section, so it has more edge available to resist that shaft moving forward. And so this sits in the transmission. Let me show you why it's such a big deal and it's so important to replace this. Alright, so there's a lot of articles out there on the Lotus forums about replacing the circlip on this and why you should do it, and they talk through how to do it. But you know, it's really difficult sometimes in text to understand. So I think, you know, a video is going to help quite a bit in addition to that text that's out there. So if I put this down in here, right, on the primary shaft in the transmission, there's a spring in there. This thing is, and you can see it popping up, right? Spring loaded. So that circlip, when I push this down, that circlip goes in here and it keeps this from moving forward. Now, why is that a big deal? Well, I'll tell you. This goes directly into your crankshaft. There's what you call a spigot bearing in your crankshaft. There's a little washer here that goes on the end, and then when you fit the transmission with the bell housing on it to the engine, this goes in the back of the crank. Alright, so here's what happens. When it's in the crankshaft, it's pushed in by the spring, right? It's down in the transmission. So if your circlip goes, boom, this pops up. When this pops up, this little rubber nylon spacer right here between the back of your crankshaft and your clutch shaft, as this is turning, right, I'm going to pull it out, as this is turning and it's forced against the back of the crank, then this gets ground down to dust in no time. When that's gone, now you've got the clutch shaft with the metal face turning on the back of your metal crankshaft. So you're just milling away at the back of that crank. And if you don't catch this in time, and over time, you're not only looking at replacing a circlip, you're looking at possibly replacing this clutch shaft and having to re-mill out the back of your crankshaft, if you're lucky and nothing else goes bad as a result of this. So that's why it's such a big deal, and that's why this little insignificant rectangular cross-section circlip is a tremendous upgrade over the original. You know, it had a round cross-section to it. So you get more bearing surface with this. And this is a, you know, it's $1 part, if that, something like that. I don't even know. But if you get into your transmission, or if you have your transmission off your car for any reason, for God's sakes, replace this thing, man. And to get the transmission torn down this far, super easy. I'm going to show you how to put it back together again, and once you see how to put it back together again, you're going to realize that there's really nothing to tearing this thing down, at least to this point. I'm not going inside of it, because that's way above my pay grade. I'm going to install the new circlip. And honestly, I don't know the best way to do this. I haven't done it a whole lot. What I'm going to do is probably slide it over the top of the gears here, the splines on the shaft. I don't want to stretch it out and compromise the integrity of the steel's ability to rebound to its original shape. It has a certain amount of yield to it. I don't want to go past that. Okay, so it's on there. I'm just going to slide it down. Cool. So now it's on the shaft, right? Now if I take the shaft, I'm going to put it in. Now it's just a matter of convincing that circlip down into the receiving slots on the primary shaft of the transmission. So I think what I'm going to do is probably get 2 small screwdrivers and see if I can convince it to go in that way. Got it. All right. So now, shaft is not coming out. Done. Cool. Let's go on to the next step. All right, next 2 parts. The scroll housing. No idea why they call it that. And then the support tube. On the tube, there's 2 big rubber O-rings on either side. Did replace those. Again, I mean, all the expense with the transmissions, not much at all, so well worth your time to do this. All right, this is going to go in first. It only goes in one way. There's a little fork type shape there, and that goes over receiving part here in the transmission, so I'm going to slide it down. Here we go. Seats in there nicely. And then the support tube goes on top of that. All right, here's the differential. It's got a bearing on either side. I didn't replace the bearings. They're in good shape. No reason to, and you don't want to get into having to pull those off and press new ones on. So I was tempted, however, to go with a different gear ratio in this because I really wanted to get some more. I had my mind set on more low-end torque, more off the line, because I'm not out there on the track running 6,000, 5,000 RPMs all day long. I'm really street driving, so I like to take off from a red light and really have that excitement and that energy in the low torque range. But, you know, I just couldn't justify the cost. That's not an inexpensive proposition. So I'm going back with the original. I'm going to grab this in where the axles fit into. It only goes in one way, so you can't mess it up. You can bring it up. You know, just drop it in there, making sure it sits on those bearing surfaces. All right. That's all there is to that. Applying a bead of ultra black here on the bell housing. And I'm gonna, I did take the differential back out again. I wanted to get some gasket material in between in some locations that would have been a little more difficult with the differential in there. I'm going to put it back in before I put these 2 together. All right, with the ultra black, you have to just mate the 2 surfaces and put a little bit of pressure on them so the gasket material oozes out a little bit. But you don't want to bolt it up right away because it needs to sit for for an hour before you actually torque it down. That's a mistake a lot of people. I've made that mistake a lot. I'm just going to mate these 2 surfaces together, finger tighten them, and then come back in an hour and torque them down. Good. I'm going to let that sit for an hour and then come back and torque it down. Yeah, it's been an hour and I torqued down the bell housing to the gearbox. And now, time to go ahead and put the axles in. So to do this, there's some large spacers. And when you take it apart, it's very careful. These spacers fit in here. It's very careful that when you take this apart, you don't let them fall out. You want to make sure that the ones that go on the left side stay on the left side, and ones that go on the right side stay on the right side. The right side's going to have this big one, generally along with two smaller ones, and the right side has a longer axle as well. When you put them back together, very simple. You just put your spacers in there. All right. I'm trying to do this standing up, and gravity is not my friend. I'm doing the left side. If you're looking at the back of the car at the motor, I'm doing the left side. And that gets the shorter axle shaft. You can see here there's a difference between the two. Especially if I lay them on the table like that. Alright, so I want the shorter one. That's just going to fit up here. Turn the axle till it slides in. And then you've got bolts, and those bolts are M7. And I tried to get new ones, but I'm telling you, I cannot find M7 bolts anywhere on the internet. I think these are M7 by like 35 millimeters. So 7 millimeter by 35 millimeter. Looks like a pretty standard thread on there. Couldn't find them anywhere, so I took these to the brass wheel on my benchtop grinder, cleaned them up, and painted the heads. So these just go back in here like this. Now before I do that though, I'm going to take it apart, put a gasket on each side, and then probably some sealant on either side of the gasket to make sure it's nice and sealed and we don't have any leaks afterwards. Alright, so I got some ultra black down here on either side of my gasket. I got my gasket here. So now I'm ready to put this thing in. Same deal as when I did the bell housing to the transfer case. You don't want to torque it down. You got to give it an hour to set up before you torque it down. So I'm just going to go finger tight. All right. Let's see if I can get this in there without making a mess. There we go. Make sure it's lined up correctly before I get that gasket material everywhere. All right, that's it. So I'm going to go around and finger tighten all of these and then come back in an hour, torque it down, and then do the other side as well. But essentially that's all there is to it. Hey, we're getting close to getting the transmission back on the motor. Excited about that. So right now I just put the rear main seal in the housing and then fit the housing over the crankshaft. I torqued down the bolts, so I'm ready to put the flywheel on. When I had it in the machine shop, I had them balance the flywheel with the pistons and the crankshaft. So everything was balanced together. So I got it marked from the machine shop, and they marked the flywheel for me. So I know how to put that back together again. Just going to put this baby on and then torque it down to 55 foot-pounds. Alright, I've got ARP bolts instead of the bolts that came with the motor. I swapped them out for these. So I'm going to run all these in, torque them to 55, and then we'll come back and get the pressure plate and the clutch on. And then it's transmission time, or transaxle time, or transfer, whatever you want to call it. The gearbox. Hey, all right. Gonna install the clutch on the pressure plate and then on the flywheel. So aligning this clutch plate can be a real pain in the butt, right? If you don't get it right, when you go to mate up your transmission, the holes aren't going to be aligned and you won't be able to get your transmission on the motor. That's very, very frustrating. So I bought this one here. It's the one they sell from SJ Sports Cars. And you know, there's not much to it. It's plastic for the most part. And of course it's got a little brass wheel in the middle here. I'm going to show you how to use this thing because it's kind of funky. Alright, this is one piece. This could screw off if you wanted it to, but for the most part it stays on there. There's 3 different sizes of these in the kit, and you got to find the one that best fits. Take this big side that best fits inside your pressure plate. The biggest one in the kit is the one that works for the Lotus. So here's how you do it. You slide this brass, it's like a bolt, but what it's made to do is as you tighten it, it expands that end. And that expansion is what latches onto the clutch and keeps it in place in the center of your clutch plate. Alright, so then that goes through here. Pretty simple. And then you take this big brass nut and put it on there. It's all good. Alright, now the fun part. Right? Don't worry about lining it up too much right now. So you come through from this side and you can see that blue portion just right there in the gears of the pressure plate. So once you've got that there, all I'm doing is now I'll turn it this way so you can see it. I'm going to turn this brass wheel, and what's going to happen is it's going to expand that piece of plastic inside the clutch plate, and it's going to hold it there. See, it's getting tight? Okay, it's got it. Once you do that, this big blue knob, you're going to turn this until it's kind of flush with the pressure plate. All right, once you do that, you have a unit. It's not going to fall apart anymore. Now you center it. Put it on my lap here, and I'm looking in around the edges, and I'm lining it up the best I can. It looks pretty good. Yeah, actually it looks really good. Alright, so once you got it lined up, I'm going to tighten that large blue knob some more, and that's going to hold that pressure plate in that position. Alright, I was tightening this one right here. So now I've got a sturdy unit. So now I'm going to put it on the motor. Of course, it was balanced with this on it at the machine shop, so they marked it there, and I believe my mark is down here, so I generally know how this thing lines up. Right there, I got it on there. Clutch plate's right in the middle. I just need to tighten down all the bolts on the pressure plate now, and once I do that, that clutch will be forced against the flywheel, and it's not going to move after that. And then I can just unscrew this brass wheel here, and that whole thing will come right back. Then again, there it is. It's not expensive at all. So if you're doing a clutch, save yourself some headache. Just get this. I can't remember. It might have been like 12 bucks or something like that. Don't recall, but I remember it didn't break the bank. So yeah, all right, I'm going to tighten this baby down, torque it up. You know, I'm running solo here in the shop. Don't have a helper with me today. I don't want to throw up my back. I don't want to do extra lifting. And I try to make this as easy as possible. So what I've got, motor suspended on the engine hoist, transmission on a dolly, right? Got this at Harbor Freight, it was like 15 bucks. And it's just a matter of lowering the motor down until you get to the right height, and then I've just got some 1x6 inch or shortcuts of wood under there, and I just add a couple of those to get the angle on the transmission right, and that got me to this point here, right, super close. So now you know, just a little wiggling, lining up, and I'm ready to put some bolts in there, start to bolt this thing home. So it went in super easy, and like I said, I've done this the wrong way in the past, and you know, you end up getting really pissed off and frustrated, and you stand a better chance of breaking shit when you do that. So yeah, less work is better. So I'm going to get some bolts in this bad boy, bolt it up, and then I'm going to get this thing back in the car. I almost forgot to check to see if shims were required at the bottom of the motor. Here's what I mean by that. This is a page out of the service manual, and right down here, if your oil pan is stamped with like a 0.1 or a 0.2, then you've got to put shims between the motor and the transmission that equal that width, that dimension. And it's only the bottom two bolts, right? It's only the bottom two on the transmission going into the bottom two on the oil pan. I have to admit, I forgot in the past, and I got lucky after getting the motor back together again and looking at the oil pan. It didn't require shims. So I was like, whew, this time I need them. So I'm gonna go get those in before I bolt it together. Man, I'm kind of excited. To have it back in the car, yeah, that's cool, but to free up some garage space, it's you know, you tear these things apart, man, there's a lot of parts all over your garage. So I'm very happy to get some shelf space and some cabinet space back in my garage. So looking forward to getting this thing in. All right, guys. Well, that was fun as always, and I look forward to another episode coming to you very soon here. But in the meantime, hey, don't let this happen to your Lotus. See ya.